Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you now. Dr. Elie Jarrouge is a returning guest on our show. Check out his first appearance on episode 133 of Boundless Body Radio. Dr. Elie Jarrouge is a medically trained hospitalist and had been working in hospital medicine from 2013 to 2022 when he started working at his own practice full-time. Dr. Jarrouge has seen firsthand the advanced complications of chronic metabolic diseases, such as obesity, diabetes, NAFLD, heart disease, stroke, dementia, and autoimmune disease. After watching conventional treatments for chronic disease fail his patients for many years, and after suffering from his own health issues, he decided to do his own research and blaze his own path. He realized that the treatment is not more pills, but rather to fix the root cause, which revolves around food and lifestyle management. He eventually used a low-carbohydrate lifestyle with his own health to lose 35 pounds, reverse his hypertension and insulin resistance, and cure his lower back pain. He now helps people reclaim their health by coaching them through lifestyle changes and helps deprescribe medications. He currently practices medicine remotely via telemedicine. You can find Dr. Elie Jarrouge on his website at www.metabolichealthmd.com and on Twitter at Elie Jarrouge MD. Dr. Elie Jarrouge, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you for having me back. It's been a while.
It's been a while, man. It's been almost 3 years. I can't even believe it. You're one of my absolute favorite people to follow on Twitter. We were just talking offline about certain debates that are going on in the low carbohydrate space. And I do appreciate that you're able to kind of avoid some of those things for the most part and just present the information that you're finding. I love seeing the facts and everything that you're observing. I love a recent poll that you just did, which I want to talk about. But more than that, like every second or third tweet you make is your delicious food, which every time I see it looks so good. The burgers you're making these days look absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, when you get bored of a steak, just grind it up and make it a burger. It tastes, it's so good.
Man, that's awesome. So are I thought I did see that. You are grinding your own meat?
Yeah, I got just a basic meat grinder from Amazon, and I played with it with the coarseness and all that stuff, and I discovered it's really delicious if you get enough fat. And sometimes I have a fatty steak and you get that more than 80-20 fatty piece of meat. It's so good. Yeah.
Wow.
So good.
That's awesome. I bought a meat grinder like 5 years ago. I've used it exactly 0 times. I don't know why. Like I got really like intimidated by it. It seems like once you learn how to use it, it's very easy. And
yeah, it's very easy. Okay. Yeah, you just want to wash it right away and then just clean it up because you don't want meat drying up and things like that happening.
Okay. I think I got too caught up in this meat grinder's ability to make like sausages and like dry cured sausages. And I think that's a little sketchier.
Yeah, I don't get into that. Yes, I do have the tools. You can do the casing and all that stuff. I just want to grind up some meat, and especially if it's a tough cut of meat when, you get a roast or you just don't want to wait 6 hours. You just grind it up and then make burgers out of it.
That is a great idea. Okay, I'm gonna make you a promise right here that I'm going to do it myself. I'm gonna take the initiative. I think ground chuck would be a great example of something like that because exactly. Very inexpensive, easy to find. You could make roast, but you have to do it low and slow. And so if you can grind something like that up, it should have plenty of fat and hold together. And again, your pictures of making it look absolutely delicious.
Thank you. Yeah, you should do it. Thank you.
It's just about lunchtime, so maybe I'm just getting a little hungry. Besides talking about your delicious food, it has been a while since you've been on the show. So please, if you don't mind, remind our audience kind of how and why you got into medicine and what caused a shift in the way you were practicing medicine.
Sure. How long do we have?
As long as you like.
All right. So I grew up wanting to be a doctor. One of those, like everybody called me doctor, my parents. So it's not like it was pressure, but I just always felt the desire to help people. I always was amazed by the doctor coming home, house calls back in Lebanon from my grandmother. So I always was fascinated by the idea of healing and having someone, give them medicine and get them to feel better. So I was always on that track. And when I moved to the US in 99, 2000, I went with the same mind, I did biology, then I went to medical school. I went to medical school in Buffalo, New York. Then I came down to Houston for residency in 2008. I did internal medicine residency, and I specialized in kidney diseases as a nephrologist. But then when I finished in 2013, I didn't want to deal with chronic diseases at the time. I didn't want to deal with dialysis patients and diabetes and all these complications because I felt like I would be helpless, just prescribing medication. So I ended up going to hospital medicine, which dealing with more acute care, like people coming to the hospital for an injury or a heart attack or infection, whatever. You can actively treat these patients and make them feel better. So I was working at the county hospital, then a private hospital. So for over 9 years, I was part of the Baylor College of Medicine system, and was in a leadership position as well. But during that time, over the years, I gained weight and I wasn't feeling great. I had my blood pressure was a little elevated. My A1C was borderline pre-diabetic, 5.7, I think I remember. And then chronic back pain. So I just wasn't feeling great. And then one day in 2014 or 15, I just discovered this Whole30 diet and I was getting pressure to kind of fix my health. So let me try it. And I did this Whole30, which is kind of paleo. And I felt really good. My back pain was improving. I lost a lot of weight, 15 pounds or so quickly. So then that opened up my eyes to the world of nutrition. It's like, what else could be there? So and then I went on a journey of keto, paleo, keto, carnivore, and then everything in between. And then got to a point where I feel so good, but I was also very upset with the way we practice medicine because I knew it wasn't going to help patients. So even in the hospital, I started kind of advising off the record, people coming in with the complications from obesity and diabetes and fatty liver disease and all that stuff. And I was just trying to help them to do better, but I didn't follow them long term, so I never know what happens to them. Except one time, this patient had pretty bad fatty liver disease to the point of near cirrhosis, but it wasn't quite scarred, but it was very inflamed. It's called NASH, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. And then they were desperate, her and her husband didn't want to get on a liver transplant list. The liver was failing. So I gave him that talk about sugar and fructose and carbohydrates. And if they cut out those things and start eating better, and they may avoid that path. And 3 months later, I discovered that she did that. And then her liver completely normalized and never got on a transplant list. So that was kind of a aha moment. Like I can speak to a person if they build enough rapport with them, really haven't changed the trajectory if they're open to it. And then COVID came around and I saw people who are dying and ending up in the ICU, primarily metabolically unhealthy, obese, diabetic, pre-diabetic, hypertensive, heart disease. So that kind of consolidated my belief that if they weren't metabolically sick, that infection probably would have been fine and would never see them in the hospital. So I started this side coaching thing. Everybody was online. So I started doing these coaching, started posting on Twitter, and then eventually on Instagram, and then got some traction and with some support from a lot of people in the local community. It does help to have an MD because it kind of gives you credibility, even if I didn't know much, but it does help. And that kind of got traction. And I guess my word was people kind of resonated with it. And my practice started growing, and eventually I decided to leave hospital medicine. I did it gradually because my heart wasn't in it anymore. Wow. So when I talked to you last, I was still starting. I think I was still in the hospital at the time. So I transitioned completely out, and I do this full-time virtual care, a lot of coaching, but also sometimes a lot of times medical intervention in terms of deprescribing medications along.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Am I safe to assume that making that decision probably meant you took a bit of a pay cut, especially like initially?
Absolutely. I mean, when I pulled the plug, I wasn't making nearly as much as I was doing at the hospital. So I knew that was a risk, but I also knew financially I never took risk. I didn't have debt. So I was like, okay, if I don't make money, I can always go back to the hospital. I can, there's no shame in making money. I mean, I can make it a career and see how it goes. I'm not looking to be a millionaire. I just want to help people and be able to afford my lifestyle. So, so yeah, definitely was a pay cut. But sometimes when you have good intentions, just things happen. So people start finding me. I got traction on social media. People were coming in. It was a time I'm more busy than others. And then other opportunities come in, like a small company in the Houston area wanted me to help their employees. So that kind of a good percentage chunk, you're just getting these feed of patients. So that's working. And being out there, and Sean Baker was also aware of me and noticed me. He was one of the first people who invited me to his podcast. The first podcast I had was with him when I first started, and then he invited me again. And being out there also, as he started his company, Rivero, they reached out to me as well to help them build a protocol. So it wasn't particularly my business, but it was kind of starting using my expertise and experience to start something else. So life takes care of you when you have your heart in the right place, I guess.
I love that. Dude, I've got so much respect for that. And you're right. Like last time we talked a little bit about stoicism and some of the principles that we learned from the great stoics in the past. But I think there's so much power in what you said. Like when you set an intention and you start moving in a direction, you're walking in the dark. You don't know what's going to unfold. But if you never take that step, you don't know what things are going to help you. And regardless of whatever you believe, whether it's the universe or whatever, like things work out in a certain way. And if you just have to kind of like show that effort. So I absolutely love that. I want to go back to that a crazy case of the woman with NASH. Previous to that time, had you ever seen anybody that deep into liver disease, even just like stop the progression of the disease, let alone reverse it? Had you seen it? Were other people talking about it? Did you learn about it in medical school? Or was this just like, I think we can do this, let's try it?
Yeah, because I was in the hospital setting, so I'm always seeing the severe, the sick, the unstable. So I don't know what happens in the outpatient setting, but I'm sure they would have advertised as someone who's reversed their fatty liver disease. Although the liver specialist, at least at the time, they were already aware of fructose being particularly bad, that fasting helps with liver disease. But I never, heard talks about it or anything like that. Just kind of these individual physicians. So if people did it, I didn't see it because, again, I was seeing all I saw is people already getting liver transplant, had liver transplants, they're in liver failure and needing to be in the hospital and complications of that. So really in the hospital, and that you don't see the healthy ones. So I was definitely seeing the extreme. But no, medical school, I mean, there was just mentioned. I mean, at the time we were learning about alcohol as cause of fatty liver disease, hepatitis B and C. And then, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease related to diet, but it wasn't specific about what to do about it. And it was always been told there's no medicine for it, although now they just approved the drug for NASH. I haven't looked into it, but I can't imagine it's going to come without side effects, which is probably going to do the work what low carb and sugar free does without the side effects. But it's a new FDA approved drugs for that.
I hadn't heard about that. That's very interesting. Yeah, well, we either have like a bunch of 10-year-old alcoholics running around these days, or fructose in our food is becoming a huge problem. To see that is happening younger and younger and younger, it's shocking how young that can manifest.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of kids are obese and have NAFLD, and it's just bad.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I never want to pass up an opportunity to ask about it, even though it's been a few years at this point. The COVID pandemic, you were in the hospital. The story that I was told was that healthy people were getting it. They were getting just as sick. There were athletes dying, for example. And if I practice the safety measures that we all know about, that I would be not only protecting you, but I'd be protecting your grandpa and grandma, whatever. You were in the hospital. What did you observe? You said that there was lots of metabolic disease. Was there anybody who was very healthy that got very sick with COVID?
I mean, there's always exceptions. I mean, people can get pneumonia, but but the vast majority is young to middle age or extremely old people who were dying. I mean, the healthy one, when you look at them, they may think of it, I'm judging them for body size, but you can tell they're visceral fat, they're overweight, they may not have a diagnosis on their chart, they're pure healthy. I mean, 35-year-old or 40-year-old who had no medical issue and end up dying, but they were overweight or obese, they probably had insulin resistance, a bunch of other stuff. Now, at the time, we didn't know this. These things were evolving. So everybody was afraid, all kind of basically hazmat suits at that point. It was contagious, and breakouts happen on different floors. So I wasn't completely on that, dismissing that thing. And when the vaccine came around, I mean, again, that's the best we could do. I mean, you start advising that for high risk people. Uh, but yeah, generally it's overweight, diabetes. That's just overwhelming majority. Have I seen a healthy looking person? Yes, but these people, I haven't seen someone that I consider healthy die on my watch, but I'm sure people have died on.
Got it. Okay, that pretty much.
That was the first wave. So the first wave, we were naive, like we haven't been exposed to the virus. So, such a long time ago now.
I know. I know it feels like a long time ago. Yeah. So that kind of matches up with the answer that I've gotten from a lot of doctors who are in the hospitals and ICUs at the time, that if there were healthy people that were getting very sick, that were truly healthy, not just like undiagnosed, very high blood sugar, they didn't really see that. So that makes a lot of sense. In the introduction, we talked a lot about different conditions. We called them all chronic diseases. Let's pretend that somebody is listening to this podcast for the first time. They don't know anything about that. What is the relationship between all of those different diseases that we mentioned? We mentioned the diabetes, the obesity, the liver disease, all these different things that are chronic, progressive. They get worse over time. What's the common link? What's the common root to all of this?
The root of it goes back to the diet, but it's a metabolic condition. Insulin resistance is one of the biggest thing that at the root of it, and chronic inflammation, which could be consequence. So let's think of a tree that has the root, but different branches. So metabolic diseases, metabolic syndrome, or insulin resistance can manifest as obesity, as type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, abnormal lipids, heart disease, and then you can get the complications of those, dementia and all that thing. So it's insulin resistance, and the cause of that is really poor diet over decades. So there's not one thing that was the cause, but there's all these people have shared the same thing, and usually they have multiple conditions. So they may be obese, have diabetes and heart disease, or high blood pressure, like 3 or 4 different conditions. And the more unhealthy they are, the worse they do generally. So.
Okay. What is the general treatment in a normal doctor's office or medical center for those types of disease? What can somebody expect if they are working with somebody who is not aware of or metabolic disease?
For these metabolic conditions?
Well, yeah, for these conditions, what might somebody expect? What would the standard of care kind of treatment be for somebody heading down that path, regardless of what the specific conditions were?
Generally, if there's a pill for it, it's going to be prescribed. Like if someone has type 2 diabetes, sometimes, most of the time for good reason. If someone has uncontrolled glucose with type 2 diabetes, they may give him different medications to get to control. And they may give him general advice and send him to a diabetic educator, dietitian. Just the concept is there, the idea, the right idea is there, but the kind of advice they get is generally doesn't help the disease, whether it's coming from the American Diabetes Association or any society that they put the guidelines, always revolves around the same thing. They demonize certain food groups that are supposed to actually the healthier one, and encourage stuff that make the disease worse. So now obesity, you have drugs, so with the GLP-1 and all the fancy ones, and then diabetes, many drugs, and all the way to insulin. So again, every high blood pressure, blood pressure medication, generally it's prescriptions, more medications, and then tell them to cut salt or stop eating fat, or stop eating red meat, rather than stop eating junk food, stop eating sugar. So, I mean, I'm sure they agree that it's not healthy, but the advice is more focused on the wrong stuff.
Yep. So somebody going down that path and getting more prescriptions, I would already assume that they would have to be dealing with more and more side effects over time. But how somebody that has going that route, what might be like best case scenario or a really good case for somebody that's increasing their pills? Can they expect that the disease will continue to get worse? That will their life expectancy improve? Their life quality improve? Like what in that system? What is like a really good kind of outcome?
It varies on the patient too. I mean, traditionally, diabetes was thought as a chronic progressive disease that you're expected to get worse, to be on more medication over time. And it's a self fulfilling prophecy, because the medicine you give sometimes in a long run make the disease worse. Like if you give someone with insulin resistance more insulin, or pills that make you make more insulin, that insulin resistance is going to get worse. So you're going to gain more weight, that the sugar is going to get worse. So you have to up the doses, increase medications. I mean, a lot of people are happy, they feel fine on these pills, and they just live a lifestyle, they eat what they want. And then if the dose goes up, and they're fine with it. Many people are afraid when they hear the diagnosis, then they change the lifestyle completely. And some continue to get worse, and they just never take ownership or kind of put one on one together. So just end up on more medicine than medicine to treat the side effects of other medicine, and just the whole thing is just a slow death, you know.
Yeah. Okay. So let's now contrast that with the way that you are practicing now. Already, I see a big old smile on your face. If we accept the fact that insulin resistance can cause all of these different diseases, you explained it quite well with the tree and the roots and the trunk of the tree, all stemming from the same thing. What might be a different logical conclusion that we could come to that might be able to improve the patient's life in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, if the hypothesis that insulin resistance is at the root of it, and diet, sugar, carbohydrates, all of that stuff are really the fuel for insulin resistance, it would make sense if you remove those food groups and you start improving insulin resistance, then all these other conditions should improve. This is not if you do that and that happens, there is definitely a cause effect here. If nothing happens, then you're probably wrong. So what I believe that insulin resistance is driven by our diet. Sure, there's genetic predisposition. There's some people can gain 100 pounds and not be diabetic. Some people 20 pounds. So there's a lot of variability between individuals. The concept applies. So when I applied carbohydrate restriction, and you can debate how much and who does, are carbs good or bad. Point is, if you're metabolically sick, you have insulin resistance, at that point, you're carbohydrate intolerant, whether it's coming from bananas or coming from a piece of bread. So, and you get objective data, glucose is high. So they monitor the glucose or blood pressure or whatever it is, or the scale, and they cut the sugar, carbohydrates, grains, all that on, processed food, and focus on whole foods, animal protein, protein in general, fiber is fine, and just healthy fats. And then all of a sudden they feel better, the weight is coming down, the glucose is better, the blood pressure is better, and then you scale back on the medicine. I mean, what's wrong with that? Even if I don't have a randomized control trial to prove that, this is clinical experience, it's happening, and anecdote after anecdote after anecdote. At some point, there must be something to it. And there's plenty of data out there. The thing is with data is you can find something to support any idea you have about medicine,
Yep, definitely. Okay, well, we talked about this 3 years ago, and we said that for pretty much most people that you or I have ever worked with in our different capacities, if somebody gives us a very fair try and they actually do it, we don't tend to see many exceptions. And, we have to talk carefully about that and say it might not be for everybody, but I like, at this point, it's 3 years on. Last time we said we didn't see many exceptions. Either that's more true today or that's less true today. Which do you think it is?
I mean, it's more true than ever. I mean, I wouldn't be still doing this if I didn't believe it. And I posted today that in the 3 years I've been doing this outside of hospital medicine, I haven't prescribed or added one new medication. I may have refilled, adjusted the dose, but I really haven't added as long as the patient is doing the dietary changes. Now, obviously, people don't come to me, don't want to do anything about their health. So there's a selection bias here, but still, people who are coming to me wanting to change their lifestyle and they implement it. All I can do is actually take off medications. I mean, some people have had diabetes for so long, they're so broken before that they may still need something, but generally there's improvement. And then a lot of people just come off medication. I've taken people off medicine after 20, 30 years within a matter of a few months. So you just can't argue, and it's consistent. Like you do it. Now, is there other ways to do it? Can you be extremely low fat, high carb and do it? I don't see why would that work, but if someone does it, I'm not gonna argue. It's like, okay, good for you,
Yeah. That's a very strong statement to say that you have not put one person on a new medication since you've been practicing that way. That's incredible to say. I love that tweet.
Yeah. I mean, granted, I'm not a primary care doctor, so I'm not getting everybody. I'm getting people who want to change and they come to me for that purpose. So, but that means people are willing to take action and do take action and get the right support. It works.
So awesome. Okay, so as you said, you're practicing this way because it is so wonderful and magical and just seems to work for so many people. You already talked about what these people's lives are like. They feel better. They are moving better. explain like the quality of life improvement for them. Sacrificing carbohydrates, we can all argue, is not that easy. Like they're very good and very available and very tasty, and to not eat them requires some sort of sacrifice for sure. For these people, is it worth it to get off of all these medications?
Yeah, I mean, that's why people who come, they feel great and they just want to lose weight. Generally, the least compliant is people who have bigger skin in the game or more risk. They have complications. They don't feel good. They had the heart attack, or they're at risk of losing a limb, or really getting blind. It's just really they're not feeling good. They have kids or something. They want to live for someone else and need to have a strong why. They end up doing it, and it works. But the easiest thing, the first 2 weeks are always hard. We always struggle. Carbohydrates are delicious, and I'm not saying all carbohydrates are bad. I eat them sometimes. I mean, I don't. I love some sushi rice, and I do that. And occasionally, you travel and have something. It's not. It's not about that. I'm not being a hypocrite. I'm just saying, if you're unhealthy, get to health first, then figure out what you can handle. But generally, energy, that really low energy picks up quickly. General sleep gets better, anxiety, depression improve, chronic fatigue, chronic brain fog, all these non-scale victories that just happen. Of course, the weight falls off, the glucose gets better, medications come off. Just generally, just general well-being, feeling of well-being that happens over time.
Incredible.
It's priceless.
It's incredible. Yeah, and
then inevitably they mess up, they cheat. Everybody has their bad habits, and they feel it. They feel the slump quickly, and then gets them back on track. So that experiment of feeling better is like great, maybe because you lost weight that you feel better. That's usually the excuse. Oh, they lost weight, of course they love is getting better. But then the day one meal of bad ingredients, they feel like shit, and that's generally a good. They haven't gained the weight back. Just generally, just they got inflamed or whatever. The body didn't do well with it. And then they get back to it. So
yep, and I think we both have the same opinion on this. That if somebody wants to go off, it's almost like we don't encourage it, but we also don't discourage it because it will affect you so much more than you think. Whatever was normal in your life before, you're going to eat that one thing. It's not even going to taste as good as you remember. It's going to taste terrible, and you're going to pay a hefty price. But your joints will hurt, your anxiety will return, your sleep is going to suck, your energy will be terrible. I noticed, like even eating really well, like traveling or whatever. Like I was just at Dave Feldman's conference. It's not the most ideal. I'm still eating mostly carnivore, but like I don't know how these things are cooked, and like I feel myself craving stupid things like fast food for like 24 or 36 hours afterwards. I don't crave fast food. Like those little things start to creep back in, and they really make you pay the price.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I like when they pay the price like that because it gives them feedback. It works. I usually, when they make these mistakes, I'm usually smiling because like I'm glad you're doing it early while I'm supervising you because that means this, and then it really convinces them that's the right path.
I agree. Okay. A few weeks ago, our mutual friends, Nina Teichels and Gary Taubes, decided to start a Substack. They already had one that was wonderful that I really love and subscribe to, but they also started one called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And it's kind of like a weekly thing where they find some new quote unquote study or whatever to put as like the bad or the ugly. And in the beginning, when they said they were doing it weekly, I was like, wow, that's pretty aggressive. Like you have to like really be on it to catch these studies as they come out. Well, as it turns out, it really seems like they pretty much have their choice every single week of what they get to pick to talk about. It's terrible, the things that come out and the frequency that they come out. And one thing in particular that I'm sure when this episode comes out, everybody will have forgotten. It was a few weeks ago at that point, and so everybody will forget. But as of now, it's still pretty hot on Twitter. The American Diabetes Association trying to quote, like promote health, what we think they're trying to promote health, put out a video. I believe it was with their lead CEO or somebody who was in it, I would say a somewhat condescending, kind of like they were talking to a first grader, put out a video with a plate and described how you structure your plate. And half of it, I want to say, was non-starchy vegetables, and a quarter of it was lean protein, and a quarter of it you could feel with your starchy vegetables, which would be potatoes. And she said in the video, quote, like bread, rice, and pasta. She named those three things. It went viral. I mean, millions of views. Last I saw was like 1.8 million views. It must be higher than that now. It's been a few days. They had tons of responses with only like 100 likes. There wasn't very many supporting views, and all of us were very, very, very critical about that. First of all, can you comment on why that might be a really, really bad idea to make that recommendation based on what you've described to us as somebody not treating their diabetes very well versus somebody who's putting their diabetes into remission? And can you comment on the response from the community about that?
Yeah, well, they kept the comments off, so people have to retweet and quote. And Nina was probably one of the main person who kept driving that retweet just to kind of keep traffic coming to it. When I saw it, I also commented on it. I mean, it depends what you compare it to. So if someone going from a terrible standard American diet to their healthy plate, whatever they call it, diet, they're probably going to improve. I mean, I'm being fair here. I mean, they're probably going to improve. They're cutting out a lot of junk. They're definitely lower carbohydrates than before, less junk food. They get better, but they're in the business of managing diabetes, not curing diabetes. And that's their advice. So there's nothing shocking about the healthy plate and the way they split it. That's been a few years since they made it. But the fact, I mean, their guidelines does have a low carb as a therapeutic approach. So they're contradicting themselves here. They never advocate low carb. They want people to continue to have this and that. And then again, just objectively looking at her, she doesn't look healthy either. I mean, she has definitely a lot of visceral fat herself. I would have been, I mean, she's a lead diabetic educator of some sort, but she worked at Kellogg's and other companies. So I don't believe people mean badly. I think it's just when you get paid, you're paid to not see the other side. You just, you just advocate the same thing over and over again. So it is bad advice because if you're a diabetic and you're eating carbohydrates, even if it's 25% of your plate, your glucose is going to be out of control. If you eat one, I mean, people I have like even low carb, when they eat one piece of bread, their sugar shoots through the roof. So imagine eating 25% of your plate. Just, I mean, even the non-starchy vegetables. I mean, some of them depends how it's cooked. You're getting some of that carbohydrates plus the starchy ones, and then very little amount of lean protein. So how are they going to get full? They're going to end up snacking, and the snacks are going to all be the same. So they never say eat healthy fats to balance things. So lean protein, probably they're thinking chicken. They're probably saying no red meat. It's just not going to work. It is healthier than the standard American diet, but as long as they're saying whole grains and potatoes and things like that, they're not innately bad for you. But when you're diabetic, this is not the way to fix diabetes. So I don't think they don't want people to come off medications. I think that's the ulterior motive. They want people dependent on them, stuck in the system, follow the guidelines, and then everybody is happy.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you said something very interesting there, which I absolutely love. And you said that if somebody eats this way, they're not going to be full. And that's kind of the problem is like what I see out there, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. When people try to eat that way, maybe they're really motivated. Maybe it's, lunchtime, maybe it's a Monday, maybe it's January and they're ultra motivated. They'll try to eat that way for a few meals. But the problem is they don't make you full, like you said. And then when it's crunch time and it's 2 p.m. and you had lunch 2 hours ago and now you're starving and your brain is tanking, are you going to put together a meal that's half vegetables, quarter protein, quarter starch? Or are you going to be crawling to the vending machine and dumping a bucket of soda down your throat? Like what is actually going to become of that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you got to go for the quick snack, and all the snack machines don't have pork rinds. They have chocolate and chips and terrible ingredients. This plate, I mean, they're always on a glucose roller coaster, especially these diabetics on medications that they're going to have this spike, they're going to crash, versus having a flat, kind of steady glucose response with kind of a little bit bumps here and there. But that's, this is only going to keep things worse. And that's why people aren't getting healthier.
Yeah.
And which triggered my non-scientific poll after that. It's like, how can I see what people would think of that? And then That's what I did. Yeah.
We're definitely going to be talking about that. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. Okay, so again, another comment on something you said. Somebody who does not handle carbohydrate well, they're already insulin resistant. Maybe they've been diagnosed pre-diabetic, diabetic. I have personally even been very surprised with people trying to do some lower carbohydrate hacks, but still being very poorly tolerant to carbohydrates. And I get this response all the time. Like my blood sugar was 250, but all I had was pizza toppings. That shouldn't make my blood sugar spike that much. And they'll say like, oh, this shouldn't have this much of an effect. I only had one banana. I only had one piece of bread. I took the top bun off. Yet this number was way high. It shouldn't have been that high. And trying to tell somebody, no, it was that high. It should be that high. If you are intolerant to carbohydrates, they are poison to you. You cannot have them and expect to not have these huge glucose spikes and crashes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, having a spike, if I eat rice, I'm going to have a spike and a recovery. Normal. Some people are afraid of any spike, and I want to make sure, like people, healthy, metabolically healthy people, if you eat carbohydrates, you're going to have those spikes, and it's a normal, your body responding appropriately to it. It's just these spikes that go on forever, and then you have all these problems. So people, I tell people, I see it all the time, like, yeah, it's only a small bite, because they're starting from a higher baseline. Their cells are full. There's glucose everywhere inside the cells and a little bit in the bloodstream. And insulin receptors are all resistant. So when they eat a little bit of carbohydrates, it's just going to float around, and that's why it goes up so high. So,
Yeah. Can you
the banana is helping,
right. Okay. So can you kind of illustrate why having high glucose, and maybe it's like an area under the curve thing of like, if you have tons of spikes and crashes, it's still a very high volume. What kind of damage is that sugar doing as it's transporting around the blood with seemingly not a real good place to go if you are already insulin resistant? What is it doing in our blood?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason our body keeps the glucose concentration at a very tight range, about a teaspoon in your bloodstream concentration, 100 milligrams per deciliter. I mean, up and down, goes up, comes back down, because too much glucose is inflammatory, it's toxic. It causes something called glycation, which can stick to molecules. It damages the lining of the inside of the blood vessels and coronary artery disease, small vessel disease. There's so many problems that comes from sugar being uncontrolled and just floating around like that. So, and the body handles it by storing it away. So, again, beyond that, a little bit on the bloodstream temporarily, it goes to the liver. Glycogen is stored as body fat, which is the least harmful way, just kind of an inert way of storing it. So, it is very dangerous to have the sugar floating around for hours and hours and days and weeks. And that's why people get all these complications from diabetes.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. Okay, so we talked about the powers that be and the way they promote and try to handle the disease or keep the disease going in this case. You talked about the alternatives and the things that we see. You put out an informal poll. Again, this is not a randomized controlled trial, but it's anecdote. And when you get a lot of anecdote, it can at least point you in a direction of things we can continue looking at, or it can go onto the evidence that we have, the adding evidence that's always growing about maybe we're onto something here. So tell us about this poll and what the results were.
Yeah, so I ran two polls at once. Poll number one it's addressed at people with type 2 diabetes. I ask, if you have type 2 diabetes and follow the ADA guidelines, which statement applies to you? And then the answer was, my diabetes got worse. My diabetes remained the same. It got better, or I went in complete remission. And the second poll is like, if you had type 2 diabetes and did not follow the ADA guidelines, but you did a low carb diet, which one applies to you, with the same answers? And the answers were shockingly opposite. And there was, I think, around anywhere between 130 and 150 votes. I mean, again, luckily, most people don't have diabetes. The prevalence in the world is around 11% in the US. So, having a few hundred responses, that's good. So for 130, 140 people who followed the ADA, they claimed that there were 78% that got worse. 78% of people, like, okay, I'm starting from this level, and then I followed what I'm supposed to do, and my diabetes got worse. 78%. Small percentage. The remaining, the 22% was split among the rest. Okay, there was a 4% that said, got better and or went into remission, great, happy for them. But that doesn't, vast majority didn't happen. Now, when you flip and ask people who follow the low carb diet, there's between, if you add up, got better or went into remission, there was 92% of the 140 people who voted. So this is beyond just randomness. This is like, and I assume some people have voted on twice, that they tried this and it got worse and they went. So some votes were on both, of course. It doesn't matter. Just the idea is, and there's a small percentage that got worse. Sure. Again, there's exception to every rule. Just usually proves a rule that generally correct doesn't mean it's always correct. So this is eye opening. I mean, didn't get a lot of traction, but it's okay. I don't understand the algorithm, but I tried. I posted the results in screenshots and showed the striking difference between the two. But that's enough to wonder. I mean, it's not proof for anything. Just wonder. There's something to it.
Yeah. I certainly wasn't surprised that more people had better result on low carb. I've seen it way too many times at this point, but the difference, the delta between the two was quite wide. And so I was at least happy to see that, even if it was like a 50-50 split, to at least bring awareness to something that somebody could do that might not take them down the path of like medications and that sort of thing, would be super helpful and enlightening for people. If it at least worked and you could just try it today with your next meal, like why not?
Yeah, but more extreme. Like if this was actually true, which I believe it is true, this is malpractice at this point. This is, if you have two modality, one makes you worse and more drugs, one makes you healthier and fixes it, and you go for the one that makes you worse, it's just malpractice. That's, I mean, I don't know how else to label it.
I agree. I agree. And
Yeah.
it's like the point you made earlier about the American Diabetes Association. They know about low carbohydrate. It's not that they're ignorant to it. They've said since, I think, 2019 that would be a great way to treat diabetes. They're well aware of this, yet they put out something opposite. Okay, so I just mentioned I got back from the Collaborative Science conference with Dave Feldman that he put on, and it was really interesting to be in a room filled with people primarily kind of chasing a question all about cholesterol. We've noticed in our community, we have seen tremendous results with some very severe diseases, not least of them diabetes and obesity and all these things we talked about. But so many people there were also, putting bipolar into remission and serious mental disorders. Some of these people have now become like my really, really good friends, like Robin, who also lives in Texas, really great friend of mine. She is bipolar. When she goes low carbohydrate, she has no bipolar symptoms, but her cholesterol goes through the roof. She can reintroduce some carbohydrates, doesn't take much, maybe like half of a sweet potato, and her cholesterol will go right back down to where it should be, and bipolar symptoms start to come back. So we have people in our community that are diligently and earnestly trying to chase down this kind of phenomenon and figure out, is it necessarily a terrible thing when somebody's LDL-C, bad cholesterol, goes up and someone's cardiologist freaks out and wants to put them on a statin? From everything that you've seen and learned up to this point, you must have seen this phenotype in the people that you've helped, especially when they're very lean. Where do you stand on the whole kind of cholesterol debate that seems to be going on quite a bit, always? But
Yeah, I mean, I think the truth is not 100% known, but my experience is becomes predictable. Where if my clients, when my patients go on low carb, everything is going to get better, except LDL and a number of people, it's going to get worse. And what worse is kind of put in quotation, because is it bad, or is it just kind of, it is something there? It doesn't mean anything bad. I don't believe a rising LDL on a low carbohydrate diet is of concern, and only science is only going to prove that over time. And David and his team of research that they're doing, it's already not showing much. And we'll see longitudinal data. But they also have also experienced that what they reported about the lean mass hyperresponder or lipid energy model, or the BMI, like the leaner you are, the higher the LDL-C on a low carbohydrate diet. I see that, and that's almost predictable. I actually warned patients when we first started, like, look, gonna lose a lot of weight, but as you get leaner, your LDL probably gonna go high. The morbidly obese that still have a way to go, it actually goes sideways. Sometimes it goes a little down. So what I stand on it, it's not. It's something I look at in context, and as long as everything else, all the metrics and how they feel are getting better, this is not something that keeps me up at night or worry about. I just reassure the patients that it's a thing. Uh, the long-term implications are not clear, but so far there's no evidence that it's a bad thing. So I just don't worry about it. So.
That's a great answer. I think what you said there, the predictability to me is like the strongest like support of the lipid energy model. As they're talking about all these studies and case studies and showing people and telling stories, you're just like, oh, I think I know what's going to happen. If I understand this model, this person's cholesterol is probably going to go up to this. I'll bet triglycerides are going to be here, and I'll bet HDL cholesterol is going to be here. And it's like correct every time. Like there's no paradoxes. There's no holes that anybody can see as of now. And we have to be very careful about this stuff. We can't just go around saying that it's just fine without no implications. LDL-C cholesterol being very, very high is, necessarily a good thing or not a bad thing, but it's just looking so promising and stronger and stronger and stronger with every day that passes.
I just don't believe that a diet or lifestyle that improves everything in your body and health, mentally, emotionally, everything, physically, and just out to get you with your heart disease. It just doesn't add up. Just common sense. I mean, if something doesn't pass common sense, you can build a whole case on a false premise and make it make sense. But if the premise is wrong, the whole thing is BS.
Exactly.
So, I love Nick Norwood now. I mean, he's been champion at articulating the ideas. It's all his energy and his credentials. All that stuff is going to be great for the future of this.
Yeah, I agree. And I always love this part when Dr. Sean Baker gets up at a conference, has everybody raise their hand if they feel way better eating more meat than they do eating lots of fruits and vegetables and the crap they were eating before. Every hand goes up, and him saying like, look, what if we're wrong about the heart disease thing and the cholesterol thing, and you die of a heart attack very soon, maybe next week or tomorrow or whatever it is. Do any of you change your diet? And the number of hands that go down is very, very low. And I would say in this conference, it's the same thing. Like, does my friend Robin want to experience bipolar symptoms or be medicated and basically comatose? Or does she want to accept the risk of, you know what, maybe all of this cholesterol is going to be terrible and she's going to die of a heart attack? That's a tough choice to make. But when you're seeing all of these people make that decision willingly, I think that's a really cool thing to show, what we know about this stuff right now.
Yeah. And the argument, though, it takes decades and decades. Yeah, eventually we're all going to die of something. But how long do we wait before we say, okay, it's not happening? People have been doing carnivore and keto and low carb for a long time. And you can tell who's the healthy one, who's not the healthy one. And I haven't seen someone who never had heart disease right before starting low carb keto, and then 5 years later they have heart disease. At least I haven't seen or heard of anyone like that. Generally, they already had issues before, and then it can manifest while they're on low carb. It doesn't mean low carb caused it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And if that were happening at all, the press on that would be crazy. You'd see every week a new headline that somebody eating a carnivore diet just died of a heart attack or whatever. Like that would be front page news all over the place. They would report on that incessantly. Okay, interesting. So this would be a good segue to ask a doctor, over the years, as you've been practicing, we're talking about things like evolving our understanding of cholesterol, the things we've learned about putting some of these chronic diseases into remission. As a doctor, which assessments, which procedures, which blood markers have you put more kind of faith into over time, and which ones have you put less and less into?
The belly circumference is the most important thing for me because it's cheap and it tells me a lot about your metabolic health before you even get pricked. So if your belly circumference, your belly, visceral fat is more than half your height, generally waist to height ratio for most people. If it's significantly higher than 0.5, you are metabolically unhealthy. And there's not a single diabetic or obese or hypertensive or any big person that I've seen that does not have an abnormal ratio. So some people don't seem overweight, but they have increased visceral fat. So visceral fat or belly circumference, some people do it in other ways. You can do MRIs and get fancy or DEXA scans, but generally belly circumference is a metric for me. Fasting insulin level is one of those. Also it's never been low and someone insulin resistant, so it's always high. I like CRP, C-reactive protein, the high sensitivity one, just to tell me about generally chronic inflammation. But I look at glucose, of course, A1C, a lipid panel. I focus on the triglyceride and HDL, and then liver function. I really, people don't find in details about AST, ALTs, and the liver enzymes. The normal range is wide, and sometimes you can tell that it's kind of on the upper end, and you can indicate fatty liver disease. So I really focus on that evidence of fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, inflammation, glucose. So, so overall, I that's what I focus on. What I care less and less about is cholesterol in general. I mean, even triglyceride. Yes, you want triglyceride go down, HDL go up, but even that, there's a lot of variation there on LDL with the debate. So for me, that's the least important one. I care about they're losing uh, visceral fat. One thing I've added more recently in my thinking is making sure you have enough muscle. So I think it's not talked about enough, but muscle mass, because that feeds into insulin resistance. If you don't have a lot of muscle, your glucose can't go in many places. So if you build muscle, you become more insulin sensitive. So I think muscle health is important. So push for strength training, resistance training, those kind of things. Yeah.
For the listener, a very smart medical doctor just told everybody that waist circumference, a belt, is your best way to tell whether you're metabolically healthy. If you don't own a belt and you can't afford one, you can message me. I will buy you a belt, get it sent to your house so you can measure this. I love that. I love the markers that you cited. I think all of
It's
those...
cheaper. You can get the tape measure. It's $2 on Amazon. You can just flexible tape measure. It's not the band size. It's really above the belly circumference.
Totally. It's...
Or you look down. If you don't see a flat line, there's a little bit of pooch. I mean, exceptions. You've had a baby recently. You have hernia. I understand. I don't want people to attack me for generalizing, but generally true with exceptions.
Yep, exactly right. That hard layer of fat, if you can like bounce a coin off your stomach or it's protruding and very firm, that's a good way to know that you've got a lot of visceral fat, which is highly inflammatory. And you can start taking these steps to improve that. And to hear that cholesterol may not be the most important thing that we can measure and really doesn't tell us all that much versus, even just simple measures like triglycerides and HDL. I just heard a commercial getting back from this conference. Abbott is giving away a free lipid panel. You can go to whatsmyldl.com or something, and they will send you an at-home kit for free. They probably want to push you on LDL medications and try to get that number lower, but you can send in for free. I got one, and at least to measure my triglycerides and HDL. I don't care what my LDL is, but them giving that away for free, I'll take advantage of that. You can get that measured, and you can see where you are, and take really easy steps. Like you said, strength training, change your diet. Like you can do this yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, I must say, the one of the best cholesterol levels happen in the least healthy people. Like I've seen this regularly. You get your beautiful total cholesterol and beautiful LDL in like someone who's obese and diabetic and hypertension. Triglyceride may be a little bit elevated, but that lipid panel is really not super useful alone. So yeah.
I agree. Again, unless you're looking at the right markers, it's not going to tell you that much. Man, I'm so glad we caught up. This has been an awesome chat. I love your energy. I'm so proud of you. I think it's so savage what you've done to go out on your own and leave a more cushy job. I understand that, a lot of doctors complain that they don't get a lot of time with their patients, but as a hospitalist, you did and got to change some people's lives, but it still wasn't quite enough for you to want to go out and do your own thing. I think that's really awesome and very savage. And
yeah, I highly, recommend it for people who are willing to take the risk and try something to help people, and then they can always, put their foot in both places and make it work financially, and then eventually find a way for themselves. So.
I love it. That's so cool. Dr. Elie Jarrouge, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Awesome. I'm on X, Elie Jarrouge MD, and I'm on Instagram, Elie_Jarrouge. I never changed the handles. I didn't want to confuse things because I had them for a while. But yeah, I'm only on these two platforms. I have a website, metabolichealthmd.com, and I do free discovery calls if they're interested in learning more to work with me. And now I help with Rivero too. So you may have seen my picture on Rivero, but also if you join Rivero, I'll be one of the physicians who are going to be in the background helping you come off medications as well. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's been so cool to see Revero itself kind of transform and evolve over time. And it's such a great platform that's really helping a lot of people. So I'm so glad you're involved with them. Again,
Awesome.
Dr. Jarrouge, thank you so very much for having this chat. This
Thank you
was
so
a
much,
lot
Casey.
of fun. I had a great time chatting with you, and I think our listeners will get a lot out of this. So thank you so very much for taking the time out of your busy day to come on our show. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Casey.
Such an honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio. As always, thank you so very much for listening to Boundless Body Radio. Hosting this podcast is seriously one of the most meaningful and joyous parts of my life. Even after 600 episodes of our show, I still get nervous before every interview that I do. But it does just bring me such joy to share some of my favorite people, the people that have taught me so much over the years, and to invite them on and ask them questions, and then to share that with you, the listener, is a super cool experience. I hope you've enjoyed the content of the show so far this year. I tried to start the year off with a mix of new guests and returning guests, some that are practically household names in the health and wellness space, and some inspiring people that may not be very well known now, but are certainly doing amazing work wherever they are. I'm just so grateful for all of our incredible guests. Remember that you can always go to our website to book a complimentary 30-minute session with us at myboundlessbody.com. On our homepage, one of the first things you'll see is a Book Now button where you can select a time to speak with us about your personal health and fitness plan. We don't have any set packages, products, supplements, or anything like that to sell you. People that do want to work with us simply pay for the time that they want, and that's about it. We've loved chatting with so many of you out there to bounce ideas off each other and try to offer any advice that we can. And seriously, as always, even if you book a spot just to say hello and introduce yourself, we absolutely love connecting with you, the listener, in our community. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel, which is also growing quite a bit, if you want to watch these full interviews and also shorter videos on more specific topics taken from these interviews as well. It's a fun way to interact with people who comment. We read and reply to every single YouTube comment we get, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and leave as many comments as you like. And of course, if you haven't already, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple. It is still the best way to make sure that the podcast gets out to more listeners. It only takes a moment to leave a review, and it's extremely meaningful to us. Cheers, and thank you again for listening to Boundless Body Radio.